Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation. Sometimes it's the great debate, but it can only be either if I hear from you, especially by telephone. Here's what happens. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0. The number to call is 44208-601-4555. You can also SMS the show and it will come up here on the comment wall if it's good enough. 447800008066. You can email me also at comment@presstv.co.uk. And this being the 21st century, you can even tweet me at comment_PressTV. The subject tonight, well, it could hardly be anything else. Much of the world, at least on the masthead, on the paperwork, is now at war in Iraq and in Syria, with the support of the government in Iraq, without the support of the government in Syria, and in neither case with the authorization of the United Nations, and thus in breach of the United Nations Charter. In any case, Iraq has just redefined this very day the conditions that it wishes to set for foreign involvement in the conflict with the Takfiri fanatics of ISIL. The fight has never stopped, but it has been rejoined with vigor by the Iraqi army, Shia militia, Kurdish Peshmerga in Iraq, and indeed the war has never ceased, not for 1 second, for the last 3 years in Syria, where the Syrian Arab army continues to confront not just ISIL, but Al-Qaeda, its now again ally, and a whole plethora, hundreds actually, of other extremist fanatic organizations. But in both Iraq and Syria, the foreign warplanes have been in the skies. There's something absurd about the British involvement. For all the huffing and puffing in the British Parliament last week, when you might have thought we were about to send a vast expeditionary force into the war in Iraq, we have sent precisely 6 RAF Tornado jets. And for 4 days, those jets flew around Iraq looking for something or somebody to bomb. And the headline in The Guardian today kind of said it all. It said, and I quote, "British jets bomb ISIS pickup truck." That's a very, very expensive way of getting rid of a pickup truck. Excuse me. The British are not, for now, involved in the war in Syria, but the United States very definitely is, as is France, and we're told Arab air forces are also involved in both theatres, though I myself have yet to see a picture of any of these Arab air forces bombing either Iraq or Syria. It may be that their involvement is mainly illusory. Excuse me. The pilgrimage, of course, is underway, and 1.5 million Muslims have now arrived in Saudi Arabia. These are pictures of the Hajj, very sacred, of course, to all the Muslims in the world. And it just so happens that the political regime in Saudi Arabia is more and more unpopular with the Muslim Ummah. Now, let's hear your answers to this question. Should Iraq fight ISIL without the help of Arab nations? Well, Iraq, as I said, redefined its position on this very day. They are prepared to accept foreign help, including Arab help, but only from the air. They implicitly, at least, reject the idea of Arab armies entering Iraq. In fact, in my opinion, there is next to no chance of these Arab armies arriving. I don't believe that their armies have the wherewithal to join this fight. I don't believe their governments have the political will to join this fight. And I believe that these Arab governments, in many cases, are completely compromised. And here's how. Because these countries are the very countries from which the ideology of ISIL has come, from which much of the money, material, men, and weapons have come, at least in the very beginning. And so, for example, if Saudi Arabia were to send its army into Iraq, they would have a very serious difficulty with a very significant part of the Saudi population whose sympathies are undoubtedly with ISIL, because ISIL are, in fact, just a modern manifestation of the Abdul Wahab militias, though they weren't called that at the time, more than 2 centuries ago, which carried all before them in the war to win what is Arabia to the Wahhabist interpretation of Islam. Abdul Wahhab's army conducted themselves with the same brutal, fanatic violence, with head chopping and mutilation and mass murder of captured prisoners, as ISIL is doing today in Iraq and has been doing for some time in Syria. But here's some things the neighboring Arab countries could do and must do. And I include Turkey in this, not an Arab country, but very much a part of this Arab problem. They have to seal their borders to stop fanatic fighters crossing those borders into Syria and Iraq. They have to stop sending money and material and weapons to these organizations. And they have to stop pumping out the ideological underpinnings of the ISIL Al-Qaeda phenomenon. That they could do without dropping a single bomb, without putting a single pair of boots on the ground. That's my demand of them. So, should Iraq fight ISIL without help of Arab nations? Let's hear from Mehdi in London. Mehdi, go ahead.
Hello, George.
Hello, sir. Go ahead.
I wanted to say Iraq should ask those Arab countries to come and help them, because it shows them how much or how far they want to do that, actually, as well. But another thing, I just saw a program with the British government, because the guy was British, and promoting ISIL, actually, what they are doing in the town, you know, how they are running the town. It was very well organized, actually. And I don't think so. These people, they have the brain to do that. There must be a proper, intelligent person behind all this. To actually, they had court in there, you know, as well, and then they had the guys going around asking people, are you doing a proper trade with the public? You're not cheating, you know, these kind of things.
Yeah. Okay, okay, Mahdi. Let me make the point again. Iraq does not want any Arab armies on their soil, and I suppose their fear is that any armies that arrive in Iraq will never leave. A good example of that is what's happened in Kirkuk. The Kurdish militias, the Peshmerga, took over Kirkuk during the summer when ISIL made their dramatic advance, and cities like Mosul and Tikrit fell to that advance. And the Kurdish forces are saying that they will never leave Kirkuk, ever, and that whatever happens in the future, Kirkuk is theirs. And Turkey has a long-standing territorial claim on Mosul, and if the Turkish army were to directly intervene on the ground in Iraq, the first place they'd head for is Mosul, and if they got their hands on it, they'd never give it back. if Saudi Arabia invaded the west of Iraq, it's very unlikely that they'd want to leave any time in a hurry. So that's the dilemma, Mehdi. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I didn't know that, actually. Thank you for the information. I really didn't know that. And plus, you know, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they hate Iraq, which is because they went to invade their country as well. So they really want to see that how they get damaged and this kind of things. They got this grudge against these two countries as well. And that's one of the reasons.
Well, yeah. I mean, Kuwait is a sovereign state, and it should be respected as such. Historically speaking, of course, Kuwait was part of Iraq and was taken from Iraq by British imperialism. So there is a grudge in Kuwait, understandably, against Iraq. There's also a bigger grudge in Iraq about the fact that Kuwait was taken from them. Mehdi, thanks for the call. We're talking about Iraq. And Omar in New York is up next. Go ahead, Omar.
Hello, George Galloway. So nice to talk to you again.
And you, sir.
I hope you feel a lot better after that despicable assault that happened to you in London.
By the grace of God, I'm fighting fit. Thanks, Omar.
Inshallah. Let me first of all say here that Iraq wants no Arab army on their land, and they have all the good reasons for it. I mean, if we only take a few looks back in the past, they have always been betrayed like any Arab country out there. We, as the West, we should definitely look at the reasons behind why Saudi Arabia or any other of the Gulf states would want to help, under quotations, Iraq or Syria for that matter. They have been the ones who are responsible for this cancer we call ISIS to spread around the region. They have been the ones who gave them financial support from the very beginning. They have been the ones who gave them weaponry, who trained them. God knows what else they have done. Now, I find it very ironic that they would just be the ones now that would try to help the legitimate government.
Nobody can trust them, Syria. Omar. Nobody can trust their intentions.
Exactly, and that's the whole thing. And of course, we all want humanitarian help to the Iraqi people, to the Syrian people, but when they come from the corrupt government, the corrupt kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we should definitely question their motives. Now, I would say stop all the support to these moderate rebels. You call moderate, but we all know that they're all the same.
As I put it, Omar, a moderate fanatic in Syria is a man who will only eat half of your heart.
Exactly. My point exactly. So we should stop this whole hypocrisy of, okay, well, we're going to support them here, but at the same time, we're going to be fighting them over there, you know, for the sake of the public eye. I don't know. That's not.
I actually think it's. I think it's an academic question anyway, Omar. Let me assure you of something. The armed forces, the military, the army of the United Arab Emirates is definitely not going to fight in Iraq or Syria. In fact, God forbid that anyone should invade them, but they wouldn't fight there either. These armies are largely imaginary. They exist to take up the slack of what would otherwise be unemployment or underemployment in their countries. They are there so that their countries can spend vast amounts of money buying weapons from the West, which they can't use. And they're there to defend the ruling class, the royal families in their countries. That's the purpose of these armed forces. Omar?
Exactly.
Omar, we've lost him. Thanks very much for the call. Great to talk to you again. Let's hear from Sammy in Kent in England. Sammy, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother George.
Walaikum salam, go ahead.
ISIL, I think that they're just... well, I definitely think that Iraq should fight them themselves. obviously these Gulf nations are just. I mean, that they like everyone else has been saying, they've been, they created them in the first place. It's like Frankenstein's monster. I do think if anyone helps, it should be Iran. And I think there's a pretext behind this. America and the Gulf states, they're not going in to get rid of ISIL. I mean, they created them in the first place. They want regime change in Syria and Iraq, and it's a stepping stone to Iran, which will, eventual world domination. You think, or am I making sense? I'm a bit nervous.
No, of course I understand your thesis. I don't agree with it. There's going to be no more world domination for anybody. The Chinese government would not tolerate that. The Russian government wouldn't tolerate it. Other countries in the BRICS group would never tolerate that. So I don't think that's going to happen. They're not going to invade Iran. They can't fight Iran. They've just had a beating in Afghanistan. They previously took a beating in Iraq. They're going to bomb, but they're not going to put soldiers on the ground, Sammy.
Where are these Arab states with Gaza, Why didn't they help them?
Well, exactly. Who knew that these Arab countries had these air forces? Who knew that they had warplanes? What a pity that none of them could get off their ample backsides and come to the assistance of the Palestinian refugees being mercilessly bombarded for 5 weeks and thousands of deaths.
Exactly.
In fact, the Arab League couldn't even meet, couldn't even come to a political line that would be shared by them all.
Do you think, I mean, I've come to this idea, I haven't heard this anywhere else, but I've come to this conclusion that worldwide there's a Muslim Holocaust going on. What do you think? Do you think that's an exaggeration, or
I do think that's an exaggeration, and we should be careful about using that word Holocaust. But there's definitely a lot of Muslims dying. Many of them are dying at the hands of other Muslims. But we've seen crime after crime committed against Muslims over this last period, mainly from Western countries. One after the other, Muslim country has been bombed. Obama has bombed 7 Muslim countries, and he hasn't even finished his second term. In I think 6 and a bit years, he's bombed 7 Muslim countries.
Oh, and he wins the Nobel Peace Prize as well.
Well, he got that before he was even the president, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was 2009.
Yeah, if I recall.
Yeah.
He really ought to give it back if he's a man of any honour at all.
Yeah.
He really ought to give it back. He's probably spent the money. Sammy, thanks for that. Ali is in London. Ali, welcome to the show. In Luton, actually.
Yeah.
Ali's in Luton. Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah. Hi, George. Yeah. Just to say, I'd like to say, Iran shouldn't get involved in this, because this is a big trap that's been set for Iran to create the Greater Israel project that they've got up their sleeve. And, I mean, they're arming the Kurds, and the Kurds are in Turkey, in Iran, they're all over. Yeah? So it's another boogeyman as well that they're creating. Don't you think?
Well, I think that the Kurdish fighters in Syria and in Iraq, but especially in Syria, are fighting very valiantly against the ISIL advance in the Kurdish town of Kobane on the Turkish border, known in Arabic as Ain al-Arab. The Kurdish fighters there have put up a magnificent battle against ISIL, and Turkey, which is only a few hundred yards away, hasn't lifted a finger to help them. And the American bombardment doesn't seem to have been aimed at the ISIL forces closing on Kobane. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that there is potential for problems in strengthening Kurdish military forces. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Because if the end result of strengthening those Kurdish military forces, and I think they should be strengthened, but if the end result is to set the stage for another set of conflicts based around Kurdish separatism and breakaway, then that's another problem waiting to happen.
Yep, certainly. Yeah, I mean, the sister states of Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan, they should be doing the airstrikes, not the USA and Britain bombing grain
I agree, Ali. I made the point, you may have seen it on BBC just before the Parliament vote, the one where I accused Jackie Smith, the former Blair Home Secretary, of having killed 1 million people in Iraq. I made the point there that Saudi Arabia has 700 warplanes. Why do you need to fly 6 tornadoes all the way from England when Saudi Arabia has 700?
Yeah, that's correct. And also, it's alleged that they've got ISIS has got so much money in the bank accounts. Now, which bank accounts?
Well, they do, although much of the money they've got they stole from the banks in Iraq. Ali, thanks for the call. Kamal is in London. Let's hear from him. Kamal, welcome.
Hi, Mr. Galloway. I really support what you just said like a few minutes ago about the shiny tanks and armies of the United Arab Emirates or Saudi or any of the other Arab countries that they are taking part in the attacks on ISIL at the moment. And I also agree with you that these armies has never, for the last maybe 50, 60 years, has never been used against like a public enemy.
Only against their own people.
Exactly. It was only used to oppress, suppress, and exclude every single person that says no to the ruling regime. Like what happened in Egypt recently, like what is happening in Syria now. All the dictators that have been ruling the Arab world since whoever knows. I mean, I was born in Egypt, and I have never seen the country breathing or being a free country until 2011 after the revolution, and straight after that with support of the Gulf countries, whatever, United Arab Emirates, Saudi, or many others, they supported the dictator that is ruling now, the criminal general, to kill everyone that says no to the military ruling of the country. And they took out the first elected president of the country for maybe more than 50 years. Finally, we have had an elected president, and they conspired to take him off and then bring back the dark ages of military ruling, exclusion of and killing of everyone. And that's, I think you can see that clearly happening every single day in Egypt now, unfortunately.
Yes, I agree with all of that. I omitted one time that the Saudi army was used other than against its own people, which is when they crossed the causeway to help crush the freedom and democracy struggle in Bahrain. So by and large, these armies are for internal purposes. They're a vehicle, a platform on which vastly expensive foreign military hardware can be procured and established, but not used. Just today, Saudi Arabia gave $1.75 billion to the United States for Patriot missiles, which actually don't even work. But it doesn't matter. They have no need to work. This is just pure bribery and corruption. Now, we're talking about Iraq. I have to go for a short news bulletin. It'll only be 3 minutes. God willing, I'll still be here when you get back. Don't go away. Stay here on Comment on Press TV. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. We're talking about Iraq and the dangers of foreign intervention in Iraq's conflict. Foreign intervention which has already happened, or ISIL would not be the power that it is, and the same countries threatening now militarily to interfere in Iraq's internal affairs to fight the people that they themselves created in the first place. Iraq's government has said today that they are extremely wary about any boots on the ground from any foreign power. And in particular, they singled out Arab boots on the ground. But they might as well have been concerned about Turkey, whose parliament just authorized Erdogan to effectively become the new Ottoman Sultan, gave him the permission to send Turkey's army into both Iraq and Syria. Now, by the way, I'm not so sure how the army would feel about that. The Turkish army is not a great lover of President Erdogan, and I'm not sure that they have much stomach for a fight in Iraq or Syria, for that matter. We'll see how that particular issue develops. Iran has warned Turkey against any boots on the ground in either Iraq or Syria. Let's go to the first call then for the second half. Shahid is in London. Shahid, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, George.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for calling. Go ahead.
First of all, I want to say Eid Mubarak and peace and love to everybody, all your viewers.
Alhamdulillah.
First of all, I'd like to say that the first thing first, what we all need to do is Tony Blair and Mr. George Bush, they first of all need to get tried in court, because all of this is actually their fault. So first thing first, before we start concentrating about going into Iraq and bombing everybody, we need to get Mr. Tony Blair and Mr. George Bush into court and ask them questions. Second of all, Mr. Barack Obama, Mr. Intelligent Barack Obama, we need to take his Nobel Peace Prize and give it to you, George, in all serious note, because you're the only man that is actually speaking correct. And everybody else, they don't seem to be making any sense.
Well, thank you, Shahid. Thank you. Barack the bomber, we should really call him now.
He's an intelligent man, but he's an ignorant man. And I don't know if he has any conscience, or I don't know what his plan is, but I don't think he's actually got a plan. They don't know what they're doing.
No, that's
bombing Iraq ain't going to solve
Actually,
nothing.
Shahid, they've got several plans. I think that Obama has been somewhat reluctantly pushed by others in the United States administration, in the media, in the military-industrial complex, into this new war. After all, he was elected 6 years ago as the man that was going to end America's involvement in these foreign wars. And here he is, back where he started, Shahid.
Yeah. George, all the Sunnis and the Shias, yeah, all the Muslims, all the Kurds, the Turks, the Sunnis, the Shias, all these people, Muslim brothers, a prophet said that if one part of the body is in pain, the rest of the whole body feels it. So we're Muslims, we're all fighting each other, killing each other, and forgetting that we have a big, nice world where we all can live and enjoy the oil and the wealth that God has given us. And we have to all start thinking now about peace and living as neighbors and being brotherly and brothers and sisters, and being with Christians and Jewish and Muslims. All of us, we need to start thinking about how to make this world a better place. Because honestly, yeah, at the moment, the situation is really, really bad. And, you know, it's not going to get any better unless all the world powers sit down, and not by fighting, by seriously sitting down on a table and giving rights to people and making society better, because this is crazy now. This is all crazy.
That's a very beautiful vision and a very beautiful call, Shahid, and I'm grateful to you for it. Let's go to Nigeria and talk to Yusuf. Yusuf, what do you think?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yes. Why the Iraq government, they will not demand the assistance of the Arab nation by themselves? These United States coalition, it seems like they have something devious mission underground.
You'll have to forgive me, Yusuf. The line is too bad. We'll try to get back to you and get a clearer line. Viewers at home may have heard that, but I myself was unable to discern it. We are talking about Iraq. We're talking about the question of whether or not Iraq can, should, will repel this pestilence of ISIL itself, with, of course, assistance, weaponry, and so on, much of which it's already bought but never had delivered, but that nobody else should send their armies into Iraq. I strongly support the decision of the new Prime Minister of Iraq in that regard today. Let's go to the West Midlands, see if we can hear Ajmal. Ajmal, go ahead, sir.
Hello, George. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Welcome. Go ahead, sir.
George, I'm a first-time caller on your show.
Okay.
And it's a marvellous show. You're doing a really good job, so congratulations on that.
Thank you, Ajmal.
I just want to say, some of the comments before our friend, Nigerian friend, the chap before him, I disagree with some of his comments about the US not really knowing what they're doing.
Okay.
But a few callers earlier, you had a guy called Ali from the UK, completely agree with him. He made some comments about, some of the Western countries actually supporting IS. And I think there is some evidence on that. And basically, I really think this is a proxy war. US and Israel, it's one of their proxy wars where they've popped up this regime, just like they did with Al-Qaeda. And they've turned it into this monster, they haven't killed anything near what the Israelis have done, in 30 days. So when they call, this new monster, I mean, really, you have to see it's a win-win situation for Israel and US, because not only are they supporting, this ISIS secretly, it's also creating their ultimate objective, in my opinion, is to completely disunite the whole region, and they'll keep on causing this friction between the Sunni and Shias. And like your caller Ali said, that they're trying to drag Iran into this conflict, and that's what's going to happen. Iran and Syria are the ultimate goal. That's what they're after.
Ajmal, I agree with much of that. There are three axes in the Arab Middle East. The first is the axis of resistance, which involves Iran, of course, so therefore it's wider than the Arab Middle East, but it involves Iran, Syria, the Lebanese resistance, and the Palestinian resistance. That's one axis. It's not Shiite, of course. There are no Shiites in Palestine. So we should refuse the nomenclature that seeks to divide us on a sectarian basis. That's one axis. The second axis is what you might call the Muslim Brotherhood axis of Qatar, Turkey, the former government, brief government of Egypt, and the supporters of the Ikhwan in the region. And the third axis is, you might call it, the pro-Western, openly pro-Western axis, which involves countries such as the ones we've been talking about this evening, who neighbor Iraq, but also include countries like Jordan. These three axes have their ups and their downs. The struggle against one does not necessarily mean that the other two are on the same page. Now, I agreed with Shahid to this extent. We have to try to heal these divisions. We have to try and bridge as much as we can these divisions. Not necessarily with the regimes who represent those points of view, but with the masses, with the people in those countries. And I believe that we can do so. What do you think of that, Ajmal?
Well, I mean, on your latter comments, George, about reuniting these people, you know, just to mention the Arab League, for example, I've got a special term for the Arab League. I call them the casino Arabs. And,
what?
You know, they sit there. When they come to their emergency meetings, you know, they really come as if they've come to a casino table. You know, they have no real interest. I think it's all a show, really. And, you know, basically, they're a laughing stock for the Muslim world. That is my honest opinion, and I believe a lot of the Muslim world hold that opinion about the Arab League.
By the way, Ajmal, whatever happened to the OIC? Where are they in this picture?
OIC,
the Organization of Islamic States. Oh, I see. But they don't seem to be seeing what's happening in this crucial part of the Ummah now.
Absolutely. And just to bring another topic in, I mean, you've got superpowers like India, China, and Russia. I mean, where were these people on a Palestinian massacre that happened recently? I mean, it really, you know, I think you have to see the frustration of the Muslim world. I mean, you know, we've got this new leader in India who's a pro-Hindu.
Modi, yeah.
Yeah, pro-Hindu.
Yeah, he's just declared undying love for Israel.
Yeah, and I think we missed the boat in terms of the, you know, Indian intervention, because the previous governments, I mean, they didn't recognize Israel till 1991. So, you know, I think we missed the boat in terms of Indian intervention. But then you've got China and Russia who are so silent on this issue. I know Russia, you know, they've tried their bit, but I still see these superpowers, you know, very lame in this whole matter.
No, that's a good point, although I would point out that after the Congress government did recognize Israel, it became closer and closer and closer to Israel. So Modi's new line of undying love and heaping superlatives on the relationship between India and Israel is not actually a new thing. It's an extension of it. It's worse than the Congress government, but the Congress government was in quite deep in the weapons trade and the security coordination between India and Israel. Ajmal, thanks for that call. Let's go to Germany, talk to Hans. Hans, welcome to the show.
Yes, hello, George, good evening.
Good evening to you, sir. Go ahead.
No, the question what you posed is, I think it's not so much the question if they should. The question is more, can they fight ISIL alone? And I just saw in the program that was it the Prime Minister or the President? He denied they don't want to have any other foreign troops on the ground. I mean, they made bad experience with the British, American, Polish, Danish, Dutch, etc. in Iraq. They destroyed completely the whole country.
Yeah, no, good point.
But why don't we, the West, why don't we deliver weapons to put them into the position that they can fight these ISIL? I mean, Germany now flies in weapons to the Kurdish in Erbil, and why not to the government in Baghdad?
Well, I agree with that, and I call for that, and have called for it in Parliament and on television and in public. But you have to factor this in, Hans. The Iraqi armed forces have had expended upon them since 2011 $41.6 billion. This is the most expensive army in the world, the most expensively trained, the most expensively armed. Now, some of their arms they haven't had delivered, which is utterly shameful and is the responsibility of the US Congress, which has deliberately delayed the provision, particularly of air power, for the government in Baghdad. So it's not just a question of weapons. It's a question of will. And it's a question of a secure enough government in Baghdad that can rally a national will. Now, undoubtedly, at least as far as people tell me, I don't know it well or any of the personnel at all, but the new government is an improvement on the last government in Baghdad. I would argue it still has quite a distance to travel. What we need is a genuinely national government in Baghdad, one that represents all the political forces that are ready to support and defend the idea of an Iraq, of a state of Iraq. All those who don't want to break it up should be brought together in one national government, with one national army, with the weapons that they have paid for but not had, and of course the regional powers, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, may be able to play some role in aerial power for specific purposes, to check advances by large columns of ISIL fighters and so on. But I agree with the Prime Minister in Baghdad that if you allow foreign armies into Iraq on the ground, then the danger is you will never actually get rid of them. Hans, great call from Germany. Let's go to Shanghai. Don't get many callers there. Janako in Shanghai. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Galloway. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the show. It's evening here, but I'm very happy to talk to you.
Yes, I don't know, but if the OIC is interested in this issue of Iraq, where have they been? I don't know. I
wondered if they'd ceased to exist. I haven't heard one word from them in this crisis.
Yes, because the only time I heard them was when the Secretary General, Iyad Amin Madani, was meeting with Ban Ki-moon. What were they discussing?
Have you got a mobile phone near you? Because it's interfering with this call.
No, I don't have anything. The line, and I'm very far away. So
you are very far away, and you're very precious. I don't think we've ever had a call on the show from Shanghai before. Just tell me this, if you're living in China, what sort of coverage is this conflict getting in China?
It's not now. The Chinese government is more important. It's mostly interested in what is happening in Hong Kong rather than what is happening in the Middle East at the moment. So
yeah. I suspected that. I suspected that. Janako, it's a difficult line, and you are far away, and it is morning for you. So I'll bid you good morning, and thank you for the call. Ali is in Norwich, much nearer. Go ahead, Ali.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. Just a quick point. Since the first Gulf War, 650,000 people have died in Iraq. What some people call unhuman, because it's a disproportionate amount compared to the 4,000 U.S. casualties. So the human cost of the invasion is phenomenal. The number of refugees, the number of orphans, etc., etc. Now, just to put that in perspective, now ISIS is a negative self-expression of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, because they can never do anything but serve the interest of their paymasters or their or Israel. And with regard to just a quick Islamic point, and that is, in Islam we cannot have a monarchy. So the whole Saudi system, the Gulf states that are so-called patrons of Islam, we cannot have an Islamic system that is a monarchy. And sorry, I'm throwing a lot of points there, but I want to bring it back to Iraq, that if these 650,000 people who died in Iraq, they had stood up together, and the people of Iraq had stood up together to the aggressors, to the invaders in the past 20 years, they would have achieved the goal, and that would have been to get rid of all the foreigners. And the only way they can do that is by uniting the Shia, Sunni, Kurdish. Now, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he was neither Shia or Sunni. He was Muslim. Now, the only thing that can bring Muslims together is Islam. That's my point.
Well, it's a very powerful point, and it's the last point that will be able to be made by callers this evening. I just would like to recap on the points you've just made. Iraq was invaded principally by Bush and Blair. Up to 1 million Iraqis lost their lives. Millions more had their lives ruined. 3 million Iraqis were driven from the land as exiles and refugees, scattered to the four corners of the earth. Iraq's wealth was looted and its infrastructure destroyed and not yet repaired. The occupation forces deliberately divided the Iraqi people more deeply than they had ever been divided, the better to rule them, the better to steal their things. Those monarchies that you describe are so terrified of losing their thrones and their crowns that they have injected their population with the sectarian poison that we see around the Ummah today. ISIL is an allergic reaction to Bush and Blair and Gaza and all the other crimes. God willing, next week, inshallah.
Hello, if you just comment your name and the place you left that number, and just make sure that your television volume's set to 0. So, 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You'll be directly put through to just the phone number, and then we'll call you back. Comment. And then can I have your telephone number? Okay, so